Hello my friends and welcome. We have some urgent news from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Today the drone hit the station. The International Atomic Energy Agency reported about it. However, if you look at those kind of the pictures, you may see, yes, this is the power of the drone, probably some of the batteries, but on the right side you can see just a differential of the big truck and some of the wheels with a big oil plum. I assume that this drone could hit one of the military trucks on the territory of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. However, we have the statement from the director of the International Atomic Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi. He reported about at least 3 direct hits against the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant main reactor. This cannot happen, but it is happening. I believe it is a Russian provocation. At the same time, we have the statement from the Ukrainian military intelligence. Guys, it is in Ukrainian, but I may say it to you in general, they say that Ukraine is not involved in this strike. So they also think that it is a provocation from the Russian side. It's been confirmed that Russians put the mines on the territory of the power plant, plus some of the weaponry and their soldiers. The International Atomic Agency called many times for Russia to withdraw their forces from this very critical object. But Russians refused to do it, and moreover, they intensify and escalate the situation around the nuclear power plant. They want our Western allies to be scared of the possible nuclear disaster that also might touch their countries. They want our allies to push Ukraine for some certain deal with Russia. Obviously, that deal will be temporary. We're gonna speak today more about the possible peace agreements between Ukraine and Russia. Wait for it. The thing is that we are out of the images of the result of the drone attack. The images I showed to you before do not tell absolutely anything. But at the same time, from the Atomic Agency, they say that definitely it was the strike, at least 3 of the strikes. So maybe they have some certain evidence because they have some of the employees presented in the station. Russia restricted those in their capabilities to check absolutely everything, but nevertheless, they were at the place and they confirmed that definitely it was some certain drone attack. Guys, just a short break. If you want to support my job, you may join my Patreon. You may find the link in the video description just below or scan the QR code available on the screen. Many thanks for your awesome support. Today, Russian propaganda released the video with confessions of the Crocus City Hall attackers that definitely they were coordinated by Ukrainian side. Well, they all mention a single person and Russians say that this person was connected to Ukrainian intelligence. They also confirmed that they were going to Kiev, so all of the Russian story is out there. Well, if Russians would feed you with your own ear, I think you would tell absolutely everything, as this guy did. Russians even showed the route, how they were going to Ukraine, and they were captured, let's say, near to Kamuna in Bryansk Oblast. Russians claim that they drove with an average speed of 170 kilometers an hour. It's around 107 miles an hour on Renault Symbol, with 1.4-liter engine, fully loaded with those guys. Is it really possible? Well, maybe from the downhill. It is some certain way for Russia to explain of why they were captured so far away from Moscow. So those attackers were captured around 140 kilometers away from the border with Ukraine. It's quite interesting because before Russians say that they were captured on a different highway, also in the Bryansk Oblast, but more closer to Belarus. Attackers tried to destroy their phones, but nevertheless Russia was able to recover some of the photos. Photos like this, Russia says that for sure it means that they were working for Ukraine. You know, I filmed lots of the stuff about Russia and I have many of the Putin's pictures on my phone, so maybe I'm a Russian spy in this case. Well, at least it's the Russian logic. They also say, and it's the most strange thing, that Ukraine demined the areas near to the Russian borders to let attackers to enter the Ukrainian territory. So we have a full-scale war with Russia, and sometimes Russia sends their forces, small groups of infantry, to ambush Ukrainian positions. Ukraine actually does the same. Well, mostly the Russian opposition forces. It is also happening in Bryansk Oblast. But to say 4 of the tactics, Ukraine started to demine the border with Russia. Alright, let's believe into this very stupid version. But what's about the Russian side? Do they really care about their border in this case? Putin said that the window was open from Ukraine. Maybe Ukrainians also bribed Russian border control or the Russian forces near to the border to open the window also from their side, because two sides play this game, Russians and Ukrainians. The border doesn't belong only to Ukraine, unfortunately. Plus, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus officially said on video camera that those attackers were planning to go to Belarus at first, and only after they found out that there were some of the measures introduced from Belarus side and from Russians as well, they turned to the south towards the Ukrainian direction. Lukashenko totally collapses the Russian version that Ukraine is involved in this attack. Nevertheless, Russian FSB continued to push this version that Ukraine is guilty, it's all Ukraine. Well, I'm not really surprised that they're accusing Ukraine, but this version in particular, it looks so stupid even for the Russian FSB. No one in their sane mind would believe in that bullshit. Moreover, this version is supported by many of the Russian military bloggers and paid bloggers, also from Ukraine, like Anatoly Shary, who said from the first minutes that Ukraine is guilty of this attack. So clearly it means that pro-Russian bloggers obtain quite a lot of funds from the Russian Federation. And 107 miles an hour on this fully loaded, clumsy car. It's not maximum, it's the average speed, what they say. So the maximum speed which they took was around 200 kilometers an hour. It's nonsense. Also, Russians say that the destination for those attackers was the capital city of Ukraine, Kiev. Yeah, right away from Moscow to Kiev in 60 seconds. Alright, about the Ukrainian-Russian peace deal, the information was published by the Washington Post. They referred the publication information to the people who discussed this point with Donald Trump in a confidential conversation. Obviously, we are unable to obtain any sort of the proofs if we speak about the United States politics, if they do not tell this information openly. However, Donald Trump already announced that he would finish this war if he becomes the United States president in just 24 hours. So what's the plan of the Donald Trump? Trump believes that people in some parts of Ukraine are not against joining Russia. Well, I can tell you about this case honestly because I'm Ukrainian myself. Moreover, I'm from the Russian-speaking region, Crimea, which was occupied by Russia for already 10 years. I'm from the Sevastopol city, the main base for the Russian Navy. So then Russia started its annexation of Crimea. Really, I may confirm that majority of locals did support that. Why did it happen like that? Because there was a revolution, let's say, in Ukraine. So locals were brainwashed by the local Crimean TV channels, plus the other pro-Russian forces and parties which were always presented in Crimea, that some of the nationalists from Kiev, from Lviv, would go to Crimea and create massacre against the Russian speakers. I got this opinion from speaking directly with people who live in Crimea, especially elderly people. They relied on the Russian army as for their savers. Plus, the Russian army was always presented in Crimea, even before the revolution in Ukraine, in Sevastopol. They rented their military base from Ukraine for a very long period of time. So Ukrainians, Russians in Sevastopol, for example, were quite mixed. Families, friends, relatives. I also had all of my childhood friends who were Russians. They were the children of those who served for the Russian army in Crimea. That's one more question. How would you resist against the Russian aggression if you need to fight against your friends and sometimes even relatives? But I may say this only about Sevastopol and Kacha, the parts where the Russian army was located. We cannot say the same for the other parts of Crimea. Locals also were brainwashed by the Russian propaganda, and honestly, Ukraine didn't put lots of the funds for Crimea. There was corruption as in most of the ex-Soviet countries. So people didn't see really that Crimea is developing. They thought that Russia might come and invest into their infrastructure. Well, Russia indeed invested into their Kerch Bridge connection, which is mostly used for the Russian military. So in a way, it's also a failure of the previous governments of Ukraine, because definitely salaries and pensions in Russia were much higher compared to Ukraine. So the vast majority of elderly people at first went to referendum and really voted for Russia. The other thing that this referendum is not legit if it's not happening in all of the Ukrainian territory, so it's not legal. Plus, as far as I remember, there was always a Russian propaganda in Crimea. The Russian propaganda always entertained locals with some of the shows, the programs on radio, TV. It was happening all the time, even before occupation. But if you check out the situation right now, I think that the most people wouldn't vote for Russia. Because first of all, there's a big tourist crisis in Crimea, so the salaries dropped dramatically, and relative to the United States dollars, the pensions are not that big any longer. And for the younger generation, staying in Crimea is actually no-go. This part of the territory is annexed, so all of the passports which Russia gave to the locals are not recognized elsewhere. Well, maybe just in Russians-friendly countries, that's it. That's why youngsters are leaving Crimea to Russia at first, but now Russia is under the sanctions, so they're leaving Russia, because this country has no perspectives. Yeah, it's a long speech from my side, but I want to tell you as it is, because I see that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Alright, now let's speak about Donbass. Indeed, there were some people who supported Russia, but compared to the population of Donbass, it was minority. There were definitely some of the riots from locals who didn't support the government in Kyiv. Russia at first thought that they have the force to fight against Ukraine, but later on they understood that they are failing with their policy. That's why they introduced their own managers to start a revolution against Ukraine, with weaponry and with everything. Ukraine started to resist. So the war had started back in 2014 and ongoing since that time. Now it's the phase of the full-scale war against Russia. Then Russia tried to enter Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine, but failed with their mission. So what we have right now, Russia started to bomb the cities. Kharkiv is under the constant fire. Mariupol, completely destroyed city. All of that eastern side, where people mostly speak Russian language, is getting ruined by Russia. So what locals say that they hate Russia now. Maybe even more than the western side of Ukraine. Yes, they do speak Russian language, it's their mother language, as it is mine as well, but we don't like Russia because it destroyed the Russian-speaking cities and settlements, villages, everything. Remember how it was in Kherson, then Russia went to the city without any sort of the resistance from Ukrainian army? It is the topic of the other video why there was no resistance, but locals met them with Ukrainian flags. They were shouting, "Get out from our city, get out from our land," and all of that they said on perfect Russian. There were even some videos published how Russian soldiers from the far east part of Russia went to Ukraine and they hardly could speak Russian at all. So it is a mistake by American MAGA politicians and their supporters or useful idiots like Elon Musk, who say that Russia will keep making territorial gains in most Russian-speaking areas until they reach mostly Ukrainian-speaking areas, and local opposition will make the further gains extremely difficult. The local opposition, Elon, is everywhere in Ukraine already. People do hate Russia for everything they've done, especially to the Russian-speaking areas. Ukraine will never accept the Russian peace or the Russian world on the east, on the west, elsewhere. There will be always a resistance from locals. Why don't we see the partisan movement on the south and on the east? Well, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Sometimes we hear the kabooms of the local Russian officials. Quite a lot, by the way. But the main thing that mostly people left those areas. They went to Ukrainian-controlled territory or completely left the country. And Russia really implemented military laws out there. The Ukrainian supporters just disappear. It is also happening in Crimea with Tatars. So Russia is a dictatorship terror machine, not just for Russia itself, but mostly for Ukrainian occupied territories. They basically can do whatever they want, so it's hard to resist against them. Yeah, I understand that it's a long speech, but I have to say about it because I'm Ukrainian from the Russian-speaking territory, and Trump believes that some parts of Ukraine are not against joining Russia. No, it is total false. Locals do not want to join Russia any longer. Locals, even those who did want to join Russia back then, after the full-scale attack of the Russian Federation on their own buildings, homes and cities, they're against Russia. You know, I'm a small guy, pilot, YouTuber who just shares the opinion on internet. Nevertheless, I'm quite shocked that those kind of the leaders, let's say as Donald Trump, they are not competent. We see them mostly on TV, right? They're walking in those suits, saying as they think smart things. But if you take an average educated person with a college degree, I'm sure that he or she would be much more competent compared to those kind of the leaders as Donald Trump, who doesn't really give a shit about the topic he speaks about. The bad thing that this topic involves many human lives and a very big war in Europe. So it is better to have some competent politicians in this case who would try to resolve the issue. Also from this article we may understand that Donald Trump is searching for both of the countries, Ukraine and Russia, to save their face and negotiate about the control over Ukrainian sovereign territories. So the idea from Trump is to give up some of the Ukrainian territories to Russia, and by doing so, he might stop this war. I would say it's even more nonsense compared to what he said about Ukrainian support of Russia in some of the regions. Actually, Trump already told about this thing openly, that he is willing to trade Ukrainian territories for peace. So he really thinks that this conflict is about territories. Actually, it's not. Putin already said about many times in his interviews that the goal of Russia is to take Ukraine, to get rid of Ukraine as a country. He says about denazification, demilitarization, but it is what it is. Putin wants to establish control over Ukraine. For him and for his FSB circle, Ukraine is the key to achieve their goal in re-establishing the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire, for Russia to have their influence as it was before. So then Trump says, okay, we're gonna give some territories to Russia, Crimea, Donbass, as said in this article. I have one question. Have he spoken with Putin about this topic? Because Crimea and Donbass are not the main demands for Russia. They want, as I say to you, all of the Ukraine. All of the Russian officials are saying about it. They don't need anti-Russia as a neighbor and anti-Russia for them in Ukraine. In what borders those anti-Russia should remain? If it is anti-Russia, it shouldn't exist. So we may have a conclusion that Trump really wants to push Zelensky to trade the territories of Ukraine. I believe that Zelensky will never sign this kind of the peace agreement with Russia. And also, what is the proposal from Trump to Putin? Putin already controls part of the Donbass, he controls Crimea, so what extras Putin might get to stop this war? Well, maybe definitely Russia wants to stop this war for a while, to reform their army, to get more people in it, and to start the attack on Ukraine once again. For it, they need not more than 2 years. Putin really goes all in Ukraine, and they wouldn't hesitate to use any sort of the tools to achieve their goals. But we don't have the same determination from our allies and possible future presidents of our main ally, the United States of America. Really, Trump, unfortunately, as for me, as for Ukrainian, has high chances to become a next United States president. Hopefully, it wouldn't be like that. Enough for this topic. Right now, Russia started to use lots of their gliding bombs and ballistic missiles to hit Kharkiv. They demolish absolutely everything, the residential buildings. They want locals to leave this place. The idea for Russia is to create some sort of the buffer or sanitary zone, as a Russian leader says. But I think that the idea for Russia is to start the massive attack on Kharkiv. Maybe it will happen this year, maybe the next one. The Ukrainian intelligence chief Davydov said that Russia would concentrate their forces this year in Donbass region to have as many gains as possible during the summer campaign. And we have more information about the possible evacuation of locals from the Kharkiv region, northern part of it. According to the Telegraph source, Russia started to use illegal chemical attacks on Ukrainian positions, a certain gas which causes panic for human beings. It has no lethal impact on body but causes panic. Under the panic, soldiers are leaving their positions and just go under the enemy, in this case they say fire. This gas is forbidden to be used in any sort of the conflicts. The Ukrainian army has received some of the buggies from the United States of America. They were introduced in the latest military package. This is the awesome badass vehicle, and this is freaking golf cart China Mobile. So yeah, as for me, the American-made vehicle looks much more better built. Russia is also using the civilian-like cars. This is the Soviet-made Zaporizhzhia with installed grille. This is Volga with drone protection. And this is Lada. It should have been dead already, but it is still running. A Ukrainian drone unit commander Magyar published this photo today. This is the Russian Lancet drone. It was intercepted using a special drone jammer, or you may call it electronic warfare. So it is almost intact and was captured by our soldiers. Just the lower wing, you may call it, separated from the drone during the landing. By the way, Ukraine is up to start the production of the Lancet-style drones on its own territory. Today, Russian media reported about the jet drones on the territory of the Belgrade Oblast. They say that those are the British-made drones. Definitely, United Kingdom has those kind of the drones, but from this angle and with this image quality, it's really hard to say what kind of the drone is this. Again, the Ukrainian media sources published the information that definitely a Russian military base was targeted in Yeysk, and Russia lost at least 4 of the Sukhoi 30 and 1 of the seaplane out there, so we are still waiting for the satellite images from this particular airfield in Yeysk. It's really hard to confirm it without evidence. Chancellor Scholz says that the only way to finish this war is for Putin to withdraw his forces from Ukraine, and the only way to achieve it is for Putin to realize that this war will not reach Putin's estimates that he is able to win in this war. Totally agree, but in this case we need many more munition, weaponry and other stuff, but we see now that the military support drops for Ukraine, and Putin sees that he has all the chances to win this war. As for him. Plus, Scholz drew the red lines for Germany. For example, he is not willing to support Taurus missiles to Ukraine. But Putin is ready to go all in. That's the main difference. Right, as for the front lines, miraculously for today, no big changes. The main fight is now ongoing for the Chasiv Yar. As you probably know, Russians tried to enter this town. But this settlement is actually very difficult from the geographical perspective for Russia to attack and to get it under control. There are many of the rivers, some of the valleys and few of the hills. You may say that the city is divided into 2 of the parts. And here Russia had some sort of the partially successful attack. This convoy was totally demolished, but at least one of the vehicle made it to the local homes out here. A couple of the houses were occupied by Russians. And I don't have the information yet that those houses were ambushed with Russian infantry, no. But anyways, it's early to say that Russians took this part under their control, as their military bloggers say. Also, if they take this part under control, the next step for them is go uphill a little and cross the river over here. The terrain, as you can see, is kind of difficult. Ukraine might take this forest to place their forces and obviously in this town itself, but Russia is using the aviation gliding bombs to hit Ukrainian positions. So this town will be a next hot spot in the future spring and probably summer campaign. Guys, unfortunately I cannot post some of the combat videos on YouTube, but I shared those on my Telegram channel. The Telegram channel you may find just in the video description below. Here again, Ukraine uses some of the cluster shells to repel the Russian attack in Terny near Liman. It's good that we still have the cluster munition. Also, Ukraine tries to eliminate bridges and dams to reduce the Russian advancement. Here it is the Avdiivka direction. My friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.